524.
Page 38, Calendar 524, Senate Bill number 503, an act concerning sentencing of and parole eligibility for individuals whose offense was committed when such individual was under the age of 26 years. Fair report of Judiciary.
Representative Sasser, the chairman, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for acceptance of the Joint Committee's favorable report and passage of the bill in concurrence.
Questions, acceptance of the Joint Committee's favorable report and passage of the bill in concurrence to the Senate. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the legislation before us builds upon the last couple decades of criminal justice reform in the state of Connecticut. Reform that has made us a safer state. Reform that has seen our violent crime rate drop in half. Reform that has seen our prison population cut in half. And reform that has made our state a more just place to live, and frankly, a model for other states to follow. The bill before us, Mr. Speaker, received overwhelming support before the Judiciary Committee. We received testimony from approximately 600 people in favor of this legislation before us. Let me highlight just a couple of those voices. We heard from Shaquan Armour, sentenced in 2014 for a manslaughter committed at age 20, who told the committee that in no uncertain terms, they're not the same person they were 20 years ago, and are now out and pursuing an associate's degree through Quinnipiac University. We heard from Shannon Sampiri, who spent over 20 years incarcerated for a crime she committed at the age of 19. Consistent with the science of brain development, she talked about how since her release, she has graduated from Wesleyan University and is building a pipeline to train formerly incarcerated people in manufacturing careers. We heard from Ruperto Lugo, incarcerated for 24 years for a crime committed at the age of 19, who submitted he was living proof that folks can and do change. Mr. Speaker, the bill before us is grounded in science. It is well established that the human brain does not fully mature until the mid-20s, and the young people are more prone to make poor decisions. No one, Mr. Speaker, is suggesting the young people who make such decisions should not suffer the consequences of their action. They should, and they do. The question is, at what age, after how much time, should an individual have the opportunity to apply to the parole board to suggest they are a different person and that they should have an opportunity to live outside the system. Currently, we generally provide that opportunity after 85% of someone's sentence. What this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is in most instances provides for parole eligibility after someone has served 60% of their sentence. Take the classic example. Child commits admittedly heinous crime at the age of 21 or 22. Maybe it's a kid on the street of Bridgeport who's running with the wrong crowd, gets in a fight with someone else over a pair of Nikes, and takes that person's life. No one is suggesting that person should not go to jail. No one is suggesting that person should not suffer consequences. But the question, Mr. Speaker, is if at the age of 52, what was that 22-year-old individual, should at the age of 52 that individual have an opportunity to apply to the parole board and say, I'm a different person, I deserve to have a second chance to live outside the system. They're not guaranteed to get it. They have to go through a rigorous process of parole. Victims' voices are heard. State's attorney's voice is heard from. And at the end of the day, the parole board, more likely than not, will say, no, sorry, you need to serve out more of your sentence. But for some individuals, for those who are mentors in the true unit at Cheshire, for those who have taken it upon themselves to get a degree while in college, for those who are role models to others in our correctional system, shouldn't we provide them that chance? Shouldn't we provide them one opportunity to prove to us and to others that they deserve a second chance? I urge support for the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fishbein. The ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the legislation that's before us. We hear stories about people that have been incarcerated that change during their incarceration, and certainly that's a good thing. And I'm happy to hear those stories. But unfortunately, the people that are the victims of these crimes, we can't hear their stories. They're dead. They're no longer with us. They can't share good things that they've done at their job, watch their kids grow up, be better people themselves. They're not with us. When people get sentenced, there is a sense of closure. Many times it's helpful when the family knows, those remaining family members know that justice has some term to it with no chance of parole until a certain time. The legislation before us unpacks that. That's not good. That's not good public policy. It's almost like teasing the family. And then they have to go through this process that they never intended, the parole process, which is available at some level here. In fact, I think everyone that would be affected by this legislation is eligible for a commutation under our present system. At some point, we have to stop coddling criminals and looking out for victims, standing up for victims. A lot of the legislation that we have year after year is lifting provisions while not helping victims. What does that say to society? We heard about overwhelming support before the Judiciary Committee. As I've pointed out before, public testimony is not a referendum. If we really relied upon that, most gun bills would never get passed in this chamber because there's usually overwhelming support against that legislation. I read the testimony. I hear the people that come to the public hearing. I listen to their concerns and their stories. I don't say because 5 different people under anonymous submitted something that it has more merit than some other argument. At the end of the day, the message should be, don't kill people. We hear that the human brain is not developed, but certainly these individuals have the ability, the instrumentality to do harm, significant harm, to other human beings. And to us to merely say, excuse me, because their brain is not fully developed, that we should give them another chance, it's not the way to do this. Mr. Speaker, I just had a few questions for the proponent.
You may proceed, sir.
Looking at lines 262 through 266, should this legislation become law, What does that provision say, or what does it mean? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, it says that there shall be a rebuttable presumption that any person who's eligible for parole pursuant to this subsection, that such person has satisfied all other factors concerning such person's parole eligibility. Through you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's new language, correct? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
That is new language, yes, sir.
Representative Fishbein.
So currently under the process, there is no rebuttable presumption. The rebuttable presumption that's established by this language says that the person who is applying doesn't have to prove that they have complied with all of the processes. Is that true? Through you, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure I'd put it quite in that tone. I believe what the intent of this particular language is to make clear that a judge should consider and has to consider the scientific evidence that we know, and certainly the committee heard during the process regarding the brain development for people in their 20s when sentencing that individual. Through you.
Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me. In particular, I'm looking at the section that says there's a rebuttable presumption that the person has satisfied all other factors concerning such person's parole eligibility. Isn't it true that therefore that individual would not have to prove it? In fact, the burden would be on the state to prove that they had not. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
With respect to those certain enumerated factors, yes, that's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that being new language, why is that good public policy to have that sea change on the burden on a parole application? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Staffstrom.
Through you again, Mr. Speaker. Like I said, I think the intent of this particular section is with respect to the brain development and an individual who has served a certain percentage of time and committed an offense below a certain age. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to be clear, this new parole eligibility would apply to individuals that had been convicted of, let's say, sex assault in the first degree. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Staffstrom.
Mr. Speaker, in theory, correct. Although what I will suggest is there are very, very, very few of those individuals who would actually, in practice, be implicated by this legislation. We've looked at the numbers, and there are over 400 individuals who would be eligible for parole eligibility if this bill were to pass. Those that were in any way, shape, or form involved in any sort of sexual misconduct crime is around 20 of those individuals. So it is a very, very small subset, and I am not aware of any individuals under the age of 25 with respect to sex assault 1 who would be eligible. Through you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just offer that one is too many. Mr. Speaker, I do rise in opposition to the legislation. I do look forward to listening to the debate. I doubt that it will change my mind with regard to the underlying legislation, but I do look forward to the debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Chair will recognize Representative Nolan from the City of New London, the 39th. To the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I have a few questions and then a statement.
You may proceed. Mr. Chairman, please prepare yourself.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the component of the bill, could you explain the part in the bill that details the person not getting out of incarceration immediately just because they went to see parole and probation? Could you just explain how that works?
Mr. Chairman?
Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Yep, all set.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy to. So under this bill, an individual who has committed a crime before the age of 26 and is serving a sentence of 10 years or more, which we would consider lengthy sentences under the bill, would become eligible for parole after serving the greater of 12 years or 60% of their sentence of less than 50 years, or 30 years of a sentence of more. So first of all, the individual needs to serve a certain percentage of their time. So again, if we're talking about that 50-year sentence, someone has to serve a full 30 years. So commits the crime at 22, is convicted, needs to serve 30 years, is not even eligible to apply until they are 52 years old. Even then, they have to submit an application to the Board of Pardons and Paroles, which is an extensive process. They are fingerprinted, background check, have to submit what they believe they've done to have changed their life. The victim has an opportunity to be heard. We heard about victims before. Victims are a part and parcel of the parole process. They are heard, they are at the table. The state's attorney who prosecuted an individual is at the table and has an opportunity to be heard. And we know from our work with parole that less than half the folks who actually apply for parole ended up being granted it. So just because you've served those 30 years does not mean you're going to get out. It means you can apply, but frankly, I hate to give false hope, but even more than half of those who apply under this likely will not end up being released from prison. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Nolan.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you, Mr. Speaker, could you go over the age a little bit more specifically in regards to those that can apply or how long they've had to have, how long ago they had to have been incarcerated? And does it also, if you can explain, if it starts from the time they were incarcerated or from the time that the crime was committed? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sassoon.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I believe it's from the time in which they are convicted and that it is 30%, 60% of their sentence. Through you.
Representative Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just going to spew on for a little while, so if he wants to relax, he can relax.
Mr. Chairman, you have stand at ease for a moment. Deputy Speaker Nolan, you may proceed.
So today I rise in support of this bill for a few reasons. And it's something that I believe that this bill represents something that should matter to all of us regarding our political party background or ideology, because I think this bill represents accountability, redemption, public safety, and an understanding that people can grow. This legislation is not about excusing harm. It's not about ignoring victims, and it's not about pretending serious crimes don't have serious consequences. This bill is about recognizing a simple truth backed by science, something that we all rely on when it comes to many of the laws that we pass in this chamber. The science in regards to when people are able to make correct choices, or when the assumption of people to make correct choices for the things that they do in life. And even with science saying that it is between, I believe, the ages of the age up to 26. And even then, after we turn 26, sometimes we don't still make the right choices after we are older than 26. So I believe that we need to be paying attention to the science when it comes to this. Young people and young adults are still developing mentally, emotionally, psychology, well into their 20s. SB 503 creates a path for certain incarcerated individuals who committed offense at a young age to have an opportunity to appear before the parole board after serving a substantial time. Not a guaranteed release. Having to go before the parole board after a substantial time, again, it does not guarantee them an automatic free pass. There's no automatic freedom. It's just an opportunity for a chance to demonstrate growth, a chance to show rehabilitation, a chance to prove they are no longer the same person they were years ago when they might have committed the crime that they may be incarcerated for. And if we truly believe in justice, then justice must also include both accountability and possibility of transformation. Even some of us as adults make a transformative behavior change late into our years, and I just believe we need to give the same to those who have made mistakes or errors in their lives at a younger age. For decades, research from neuroscientists, psychologists, behavioral experts, and medical professions have consistently shown that the human brain, especially in the areas responsible for impulse control, our decision-making, emotional regulation, and understand long-term consequences continues to be developing into the mid-20s. The science is clear. Young people are often impulsive. Young people are often vulnerable to peer pressure. Young people are more likely to make reckless decisions without fully understanding the lifelong consequences that might come along with this. That does not excuse criminal behavior, but it does explain why so many individuals who committed offenses at 17, 18, 19, 20, or 21, or even 24 years have been completely different people decades later. Many of us in the room can probably look back at our own younger years and recognize how much we've changed, how much we've matured, how differently we think today. Now imagine if the worst decision you ever made at 18 years old defined what you were at 18. Some of us wouldn't be here today, because some of us got that opportunity to change ourselves. Some of us were not in situations or had issues where they might have made mistakes that led them to be incarcerated at having to serve high sentences. This bill recognizes that people are capable of growth. It recognizes rehabilitation, it recognizes human development, and most importantly, it recognizes public safety. Because contrary to what some may say, this bill can actually help create safer communities. Why? Because rehabilitation works better than hopelessness. When incarcerated individuals know there is absolutely no opportunity for redemption, or no possibility of review and no incentive to improve themselves, we create a system built entirely on despair. But when people know they may one day have that opportunity to appear before the parole board, they are more likely to pursue education, job training, counseling, substance abuse treatment, mental health support, faith-based programs, and also positive behavior changes. This benefits everyone. It creates a safer correctional facility. It reduces violence. It encourages accountability. And it creates the likelihood that individuals who do return home come back prepared to contribute rather than reoffend. We also must acknowledge something different, but real. Many incarcerated young people come from environments filled with trauma, violence, neglect, addiction, poverty, abuse, instability, and lack of opportunity. Again, that does not excuse criminal behavior. But if we are serious about preventing crime, we must understand the conditions that contribute to it. Too many young people grow up without adequate mental health support. Too many experience violence before they ever become involved in violence themselves. Too many are raised in environments where survival becomes a more familiar stability. And we all know that some of our decision-making up here is to provide our young people with the programs that they need to keep themselves occupied and out of the drama that some of them get into that create some of the issues that make them become incarcerated. We all know that there are times that we choose not to support the needed things in our community that drive some of these young people into the problems that they have. SB 503 says we are willing to examine not only the crime itself, but also who the individual has become since that moment. And let us be clear about something. The parole board is a process. It is not an easy process. It is a process that takes great initiative. It takes great change in order for them to go before the parole board to be heard and even sometimes seen. This is not a rubber stamp. Individuals must demonstrate rehabilitation. They must show institutional growth. They must show accountability. They must present evidence that they are no longer a danger to society. Victims and families still have a voice. Public safety remains central. The parole board evaluates conduct, programming, remorse, rehabilitation, readiness. This bill simply allows a review process rooted in fairness and evidence. Because the reality is this: not everyone who enters prison is the same person years later. Some individuals can earn degrees, some mentor younger inmates, some complete counseling and rehabilitation programs, some become religious leaders, some dedicate themselves to restorative justice work, some spend decades proving they have changed. Should we at least allow trained professionals on the parole board to evaluate that growth? I believe we should. And this conversation is bigger than incarceration. It speaks to the type of society we want to be. Do we believe people can change? Do we believe redemption exists? Do we believe accountability and second chances can coexist? I believe they can. Faith communities across our state talk about forgiveness and transformation. Mental health experts talk about development and rehabilitation. Employees talk about workforce, reintegration. Families talk about healing. This bill reflects those values. We must also recognize the financial impact of endlessly incarcerating aging populations, especially those who may no longer pose the same public safety risk that they did back at that time. Connecticut taxpayers spend significant resources on incarceration. When individuals have demonstrated rehabilitation and can safely reenter society under supervision, that can reduce long-term correctional costs while allowing investments into prevention, education, youth programming, violence, mental health service, addiction, treatment, and community support systems. That's what we are here to do. This is smart policy, I believe. But beyond policy, this is also about humanity. I've spoken to individuals who entered prison as teenagers and are now middle-aged adults, being successful, having careers, owning businesses, creating families that also become successful. Some deeply regret their actions. Some carry shame every single day. Some have worked tirelessly to improve themselves. Again, this bill does not erase pain. It does not erase victims. It does not erase accountability. But it says that after substantial time served, after growth, after demonstrated rehabilitation, we are willing to at least review whether continued incarcerating serves justice or public safety and the values we proclaim to uphold. I believe it's reasonable. The United States Supreme Court itself has repeatedly recognized developmental differences between youth and adults when considering sentences and culpability. That recognizes that recognition exists because science matters. Facts matters. Human development matters. And we cannot say we believe in rehabilitation while creating a system that denies any meaningful opportunity to demonstrate rehabilitation. We cannot say we want people to change while simultaneously telling them change will never matter. This bill creates hope paired with accountability, and hope can be powerful. Hope encourages discipline. Hope encourages growth. Hope encourages transformation. Mr. Speaker, I believe this bill gives an opportunity for people to have redemption. And though it may be hard for some to swallow, I think we are led sometimes by our faith, sometimes by humanity, and sometimes by the love that we're supposed to show one another. That rehabilitation is something that we have a responsibility to try and give and show. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Nolan. Representative Felipe, the chairman of the Housing Committee from the 130th in the city of Bridgeport. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in unwavering support of this bill. And I stand here with a mix of emotions, gratefulness, mostly reflection. And the reason why I say that is because it made me reflect on a great many things. It makes me think of my neighborhood. I've grown up and lived in my district my entire life. And the stories that we see when we say the word victim, it doesn't only mean the victim of a crime. Sometimes it's the person on the other side of those acts. Sometimes that person is going through things at home that we cannot understand. I lived in those neighborhoods and I saw those people, and I will tell you, when I got home, it wasn't the same for me. When I got home, I felt safe. I felt loved, but I know many of my neighbors and my friends growing up didn't feel that way. They didn't feel safe. They didn't feel loved. There was turmoil in the household. There was turmoil in their minds. They were not raised in conditions that taught them how to be respectful members of society, but taught them how to be survivors in a society that was trying to get rid of them. It's an important distinction. It really is. And in doing the reflection that I've done in this bill, it also made me reflect on how we in this building measure character when we do some of these things, right? The character of a man, a woman, any person. And I went through the process of all of this, right? The fact that you have a parole process you must go through when you are eligible for this bill. It's still going to take you probably a couple of years at a time to figure this thing out. You have to serve 60% of your sentence. It's just an opportunity. And one of the biggest things that we hear is, what about the victims? And I understand, or actually, I'm not going to say that I understand. That's too strong a term, Mr. Speaker. But I do sympathize with folks who have gone through these issues. But one of the number one reasons why people do not get their parole is because of the victim's advocate, because of the testimonies of those people. Usually when you have gone through this kind of a tragedy, or a close relative of somebody who's gone through this kind of a tragedy, they will ensure that you have the right to speak up, and usually that testimony is taken into account. To my knowledge, 22% of people who are eligible for parole and go for parole get it. 22%, that's all crimes. That has nothing to do with the most heinous of them down to some of the more menial. 22% across the board. And I'm assuming that the worst crimes don't take up most of that 22%. I think it's important for me, because I did some reflection on the fact that somebody that I met on the phone who is in prison today in 2023 has affected my life for over 25 years and I didn't even know it. And I'm not going to say this man's name. I don't want to put the story out in a way that he wouldn't like publicly, but I am going to say that I learned from his sons. One of his sons taught me how to do electoral work, did a lot of things that were integral for me to get to this building to be able to make these decisions with you all. One of his other sons taught me how to live life in a different way, how to have fun, and I think that that is very important, how to take a load off, and they were always two very stand-up individuals, people who were a big part of our community. And I didn't know that in the background, this man's been incarcerated since 1991. These guys are not much older than me, so if you do the math, basically they're in childhoods. But he was raising these young people to be men. And those men helped shape my life. The woman who he was with at the time of his arrest is somebody who is an advocate, a friend, a person who taught me how to do public service when it comes to volunteering, when it comes to working with our unhoused population, which is something that I take very seriously here in my role as chair of the Housing Committee. And he is a person who unfortunately committed a very serious crime and has been incarcerated, as I said, since 1991, and was actually eligible in 2023 for a sentence commutation with the parole board, was actually granted a hearing. However, when they did a policy change, not a statute change, a policy change, they took his charges out of the list of charges that they would allow to get commutations. And his hearing, before he got his day, was taken off the docket, and he's been in jail for another 3 years. He is somebody who I know many of the people that I've talked to as advocates, and I gotta say thank you to the advocates I met for sharing their stories, for speaking to us about what they have gone through. Many of them have met him, a lot of them in prison, and the things that he's done for other people, helping them helping them further their education, helping them learn a trade, helping them learn how to be stand-up human beings and coming out here and contributing to society, many who own businesses, many who work for successful businesses, all came from under the learning tree of this one man that's been in there for such a long time. And for me, I'm not going to be shy about the fact that this is deeply personal. And it's deeply personal because I think that it's important that if somebody can take somebody under their wing that way, can love on these people and show them a better way, when they can come out and do good, that they be allowed to come out and share that good with all of us themselves. Mr. Speaker, this is not automatic. It's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity that I think a lot of people are looking at the wrong way. I understand that some of these crimes are what we call heinous, but they are not created equal. The circumstances and the conditions in which they are done are not created equal. I don't want to belabor the point or take up too much time, but I want people to understand that the faces that you see walking around that have served their sentence, that have gotten parole or commutations for lesser sentences, sometimes they've been affected by somebody who's stuck inside, just like my friend that I'm speaking of. And I want to tell him directly, because I know he watches these things, I love you. I hope that I see you soon. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair will recognize Representative Wilson of the 46th from Norwich, the Vice Chairman of the Labor Committee of the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, a few questions for
You may
the proponent
proceed.
of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, please ready yourself. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, could you explain the current parole system of the state of Connecticut?
Representative Staffstrom.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, that is a fairly broad question, but let me suggest that the parole system is fairly robust in Connecticut. We have a full-time board of pardons and paroles. The Judiciary Committee, I know, does our work in making sure we vet the nominees from the governor to go on to that board. I know that the Board of Pardons and Paroles has a full-time staff and a full application process. And when somebody is eligible for parole or probation, they have to submit an application to the board. The board takes its job very seriously. And I know they take testimony from victims, they take testimony from state's attorneys, they take testimony from the incarcerated individual, and really try to get a sense of the underlying crime, and just as importantly, what has changed about that individual from the time they committed that crime to now. Has the correctional process reformed that individual? Is that somebody who the least restrictive alternative for would be out in community with supervision, right? When you're on parole, it's not like they just sort of send you out the front door and you're on your own. You have a parole officer, you have other conditions that are placed upon you. So you may not be physically behind bars, but certainly you're far from a free person once parole is granted to you. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wilson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Speaker, how many members are on the current Board of Pardons and Paroles?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say 9, but don't quote me on that, give or take. And then I know there's some part-time members as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our late colleague, Representative Dargan, who went on the Board of Pardons and Paroles after leaving here.
Thank you, sir. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, during these parole hearings, is it the entire board that sits through the parole hearing, or is there a select group that sits through the hearing?
Mr. Chairman.
My understanding is they sit as a panel, and so it's not the entire board, it's some subset of the board. Through you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, Mr. Speaker, of all the parole hearings that the board or the panel may hear in a given year, what's the percentage that actually result in a favorable outcome of a parole?
Mr. Chairman.
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, Mr. Speaker, but my understanding is it's less than half.
Thank you, sir. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, what is the difference? We've talked about commutations as well. And so what is the difference between the commutation and what SB 503 is trying to do?
Representative Stastrom.
Yeah, so, Mr. Speaker, what I would submit is actually for those who are concerned about victim impact and what a victim was promised sort of at sentencing, actually the parole process is a more victim-friendly process, I believe. It's more a victim-involved process than the commutation process. In a commutation, what you're doing is you are commuting someone's sentence. You're essentially saying that sentence that was imposed was too long and we should shorten that sentence. Not necessarily because the person didn't do the crime, but because there's some reason underlying to why the sentence should be shortened. Under the bill before us, we're not saying shorten the sentence. Someone who is sentenced to 50 years is subject to a 50-year sentence. But what we're saying is after 30 years, they'd be eligible for parole. The reason that's important, Mr. Speaker, is because if somebody is out on parole and they commit another offense, and sometimes those are very minor offenses. I mean, we're talking sometimes a dirty urine sample, or we're talking a shoplifting, could be very minor offenses. That person will be violated for their parole, at which point they need to go back to prison to serve out the remainder of their sentence. And so that 50-year sentence doesn't go away. It just means that part of that 50 years can be served in the community as opposed to behind bars. Through you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, I have no more questions for the opponent of the bill, just a statement. So I stand in support of SB 503. I think understanding that the process is important. Individuals serving 60% of a sentence and also being not given, they're not off the hook. You know, I think we just heard the proponent of the bill articulate that an individual that may be granted parole still has conditions that they must meet in the community. And so they are at any given time the subject to go back into incarceration. And so I think when we look at second chances, we look at opportunities of rehabilitation, it is important to understand that there is a very strict process that the Board of Pardons and Paroles has in place. And so I think, from hearing from members of that board before the Judiciary Committee, and understanding that they scrutinize every application, watching on video how they scrutinize everything from a ticket in prison, is important to understand that individuals are not necessarily unscathed when it comes to what happens during these hearings. And I will say I've been on both sides, on the victim side as well as understanding the side of those that are trying to grant or get pardons, and so or parole. And so I understand that this process is long and tough. And then I have several key business members in my community who have gone through this process, have been out for over 20 years, and have been some of our most amazing and longevity-driven businesses in the community. And so understanding that this gives an individual an opportunity to do the right thing is important. There is an age that is put on this bill as well, which I think is something to truly consider. And I think the true crux of it is understanding that individuals still have conditions to meet. An individual is not stuck with their sentence being commuted, but they still have to abide by a lot of conditions upon their parole. And so I stand in strong support of SB 503, and I'll continue to listen to the debate.
About that, Representative Wilson, thank you. Chair will recognize Deputy Speaker Rosario from the city of Bridgeport, 128. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of this bill, and I want to ground this conversation in a story that illustrates exactly why this legislation matters. I want to talk about my cousin. I want to talk about my cousin Alexis. Since 1994, Alexis has spent over 35 years in federal prison for an offense committed when he was a young man. A young man still developing, still vulnerable to outside influences, still forming the very character and judgment that science has confirmed is not fully mature until the mid-20s. I want to be clear, he's in federal prison right now. This doesn't really apply to him. But he sought relief under the First Step Act, a landmark bipartisan criminal justice reform legislation led by and signed into law by President Donald J. Trump. A law specifically designed to help people like Alexis a meaningful opportunity to have their cases reconsidered in light of who they are today, not just of who they were decades ago. His co-defendant, who committed the same offense on the east side of Bridgeport, 1994, I can still hear the sirens, I remember that afternoon, at the same age and under the same circumstances, under the First Step Act that was approved and led by President Trump, was approved, and sadly, Alexis was denied. I want to be transparent once again. This is a state bill, and Mr. Antuna is a federal prisoner. This legislation does not reach him, doesn't affect him at all. But his story reflects precisely the gap that this bill seeks to close at the state level. If the federal system, under a bipartisan law, recognizes that youth, brain development, and capacity for change are legitimate factors in reconsidering a sentence, then the state of Connecticut should be asking itself the same question. This bill does not guarantee anyone's freedom. It doesn't eliminate accountability. It simply says that a person who committed an offense before the age of 26 deserves the opportunity to be heard, to stand before a board, to have their growth, their record, and their transformation meaningfully considered. Two men, the same offense, the same age. One was given a second chance, the other one was not. That disparity alone should compel this chamber to act. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Rosario. And Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a comment and maybe a question.
Please proceed.
So I stand today to talk about The power of redemption. What is redemption? What does it mean to be redeemed, and who do we redeem? Redemption is the act of buying back, recovering, or saving something or someone, often involving payment or atonement. What does it mean to atone? It's to make amends, to repair, or compensate. So my question is, who do we redeem? And who do we fail to redeem? We've created a society of selective redemption. But that's not what redemption is. Redemption is grace. It's another chance. It's an opportunity to prove the value of why you should be in a space. Who redeemed you? This bill brought many of my colleagues together to talk about forgiveness. Have you forgiven, or have you been forgiven? And it opened up the door to a conversation around how forgiving someone, it goes beyond your human capacity. That's what makes it super, because it goes beyond the natural. What does it mean to forgive and be forgiven? It goes beyond the natural. What is redemption? I stand with those who've lost an individual. I do not personally know what that feels like, but I can only imagine the pain of it being insurmountable. The system that we have foundationalized in this country has prioritized the protection of certain groups of individuals over others. Here in the state of Connecticut, we have set out to pay $37.6 million to 8 men for wrongful convictions. Who redeemed you? My uncle was 17 years old when he was with a group of friends. And I was a child. He followed a group of friends that committed a really bad crime. And in the time of his growing up, snitch culture made you life's outcast if you didn't follow it, so he didn't snitch. He went on to serve almost 20 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And it was so weighty for the victim's family that they actually helped to advocate to get him out, talking about redemption. Not only did they redeem the individuals who committed the crime, but they understood the value of redemption. It is not selective. It's not based on who we think should have it. Everyone has a chance at being redeemed. He served 85% of his time, which by statistics, when an individual reaches a parole board, while the bill says that they have to serve 60% of the time, which I think is great, they typically will serve more than that because it takes them longer to get to the parole board. And he's a farmer. He's really big into agriculture. He got married. He has children. I was a child when he went into prison. I was a woman when he came out. I say this to say, we often don't realize the benefits that we play a part of when we establish a system. Too much is given, much is required. And all of us in this space, no matter what we look like, are a part of a fundamental system that's laying the brick and the foundation down for people to be redeemed. What does it mean to be redeemed? If you have forgiven someone, you have gone beyond your natural self, because it's hard. But when you understand redemption, you know that people deserve to be redeemed. So I want to thank the good Representative Roberts, Rep. Roberts, and people who see the importance of this policy. I carried that story with me for a while because it was painful to talk about. In serving in many of our individual caucuses, and one as powerful as the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, where we are a mosaic of multiple voices, it has been prolific to engage in dialogue around forgiveness and what that means, no matter where we are on this specific issue. So I end this time with you by asking you, have you been redeemed? And who in your life put in work to redeem you? Think about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Will you remark further? Representative Walker, our Appropriations Chair. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. And if you've known me since I've been up here in Hartford, you know that that is my history. When I was back in 2010, no, it was earlier, 25, I went to visit some children at the Juvenile Detention Center, Connecticut Juvenile Training School, and then Manson Youth. And I met this little boy who was 10 years old, who told me how he got there. He had gone out with some friends, his parents, who were basically well-educated family. They went on vacation. They left him with his friends, and they thought that everything was fine. And these young men snuck out of the house at about 12. And they had their BB guns. And they went and shot out windows in an old abandoned building in Waterbury. Now, mind you, these boys were going to a very good Catholic school. They were going to have good college scholarships and everything. But they got caught. They got arrested. And they served 20 years each. And while the little boy was telling me this story, he was so upset, he was sucking his thumb. He was a baby. And at that point in time, I made the decision that my platform, my legacy, my commitment to Connecticut is to change the way we address our children and adults in a system that only understands punishment. What we think we know, we really don't. When you talk to me, you don't know where I've come from. You know nothing about me, really. But I know one thing, I'm no different than you. Yet 43% of the people in prison look like me. Yet we are only 11% of the population. You do the math. When I heard about the concerns about the bill, I really got depressed because I thought we had come so far. Back in 2010, when we raised the age, everybody fought us and said, when we raise the age, we're going to have more crime, we're going to have more children in the streets, things are going to be out of control, the costs for incarceration, everything is going to go out of control. Happily, I'm going to tell you the statistics after we raise the age. 2010 to 2019, 66% of juvenile crimes dropped. Why? Because we did programs that rehabilitated our children. We did programs that were rooted in who they were and helping them to be proud of who they are. 18 to 21-year-olds, that population in the criminal justice system dropped by 42% because we stopped them as children. We stopped them where they were growing. And we gave them hope, we gave them direction, and we gave them love. You look at the children, you look at the adults, and you say, we're not into coddling criminals, but maybe we need to find out why they got where they are. Maybe we need to look into their lives a little bit deeper. They're human beings just like you and me. They're people who want a life. They're people that want to thrive. I don't know anybody that wants to go to jail. I don't know anybody that wants to deliberately hurt people unless they have a mental illness. And one thing we all know is that mental illness is another major issue of people who are incarcerated. So poverty, mental illness, lack of education, lack of a home, lack of a family is being embedded into the population. And we don't have any responsibility in this, do we? Because all of us in here are always inviting and inviteful and talk to each other and we believe in each other, et cetera, et cetera. Our children look at us and say, why am I like this? I had one little girl, I found her in the corner at a daycare. And she was rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing on her hand. And I said, baby, what's going on? What's wrong? She says, I don't want to be this color anymore because this color hurts. I want to be white like my doll because, look, my doll's smiling. My colleagues, we are capable of understanding this bill. We are capable of growing and developing and changing our society here in Connecticut to embrace people as they stumble, as they ask for help. Higher education. We're unfunding higher education. We're struggling with K-12. And then we do a bill for homeschool because people feel that their children aren't getting an education. And we say, everything's great. No, it's not. We have to be responsible, we have to be alert, and we have to be focused. Adult incarceration is rooted in retribution and hate and trying to make somebody understand their place in society, and then they get out and we have nothing for them. One of the things that we had to do in this budget, we had to put money in for beds for women, because we have women that are sitting at York who have finished their time and there is no place for them to go. So we incarcerate them longer. When we did raise the age with the kids and everything, we saved $139 million in the first 6 years, which should have been reinvested, but we won't go there. But I mean, it's saying to us the right things is by looking at the system and changing it to accept and help and empower people to be their best. So, Mr. Speaker, I very much rise for this bill. I beg everybody to understand and feel beyond yourself. Feel the goodness that comes when we save a soul, when we save a family, when we save a community. People were always asking, why do we have this money that goes to the community or something like that? It's because the children have nothing to do. And we know that. So we said, please, we want to try and save our communities as much as we can. And you'd think that it was like a lot of money. I hate to tell you, out of $28 billion a year, it didn't even come in on the number on my calculator. That shows you how much investment we really want to put in our children. So with this, Mr. Speaker, I rise to say thank you for letting me say these words, because it has hurt and it's been painful for a long time, especially with the tone that comes out of Washington now, where I have to change language in bills that doesn't say that I'm black. It just says that I'm poor, I have a limited income, and a limited education. And that's the way they want to believe black people are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Gonzalez from the City of Hartford, the 3rd District. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition of proposed Bill 503. I want to begin by saying I do believe in rehabilitation. Young people, even those who make serious mistakes, can grow and change. But matters that it should remain part of how we approach our justice system. This bill deals with serious crime like murder. That's not a mistake. That's not a mistake can be undone. It causes permanent harm, loss, and lasting trauma for victims and their families. For them, there is no second chance. Their sentence is lifelong. That reality must guide our decision. We must ask whether early release in these cases to really reflect justice. Rehabilitation is not guaranteed. While some individuals may change, others may not. The risk is too high to get it wrong. I'm also concerned that this bill does not give enough weight to the voices of victims' families. Any process that allows early release can reopen deep emotional wounds. Families should not feel that their loss is being revisited without their voices truly being heard. Public safety should come first. We are responsible not just for those who have committed crimes, but to anyone in our community. When gangs were active in Hartford, many residents couldn't sleep, and there were killings one after another. With changes like this, many gang members could become eligible for parole, and some part of gangs for life. We also need strong reentry plans. People cannot come back to the same environment and the same influences without real support. It's not just one person being released, could be many. And as far as I know, I think that between this year and next year, it could be like maybe 610. We must ask, how will we make sure our community stays safe? They should have job training before release, along with stable housing and employment already in place. There must be stronger system and safeguard before we even consider something like this. I do believe in rehabilitation and second chances, but we must also make sure people are safe. If we are going to make changes, we need strong protection and must keep victims at the center. I do not believe this bill, as written, achieves that balances. I also want to say, I want to add to this. When the gangs in Hartford, they were very active, it was a nightmare. I can tell you it was a nightmare. And you can imagine a mom like me going to the worst areas in Hartford looking for my boys. They were 12 and 13. And I raised those kids by myself. When they reached the age to go to high school, they were approached every day by gang members. If you don't join, we're going to beat you up. And those kids that I raised by myself, at that time, they were scared. Even to their shadows, they were scared. So you believe those kids, they were not streetwise. They're always in my house. I never let them out, only for school. They joined the gangs. Not because they were bad kids, because they were afraid. And I was sometimes at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning in the worst area in Hartford looking for my boys by myself. And like me, there were a lot of other moms. They were out there afraid and suffering what was going on with our kids. It was terrible. It was terrible. I don't want that for anybody else. I don't want to see a mom suffering at 3 o'clock in the morning looking for their kids. Those gang members, even though they were kids, they were out there wilding out. And if we're going to do something for them, I was looking for the bill. And I saw all those sponsors on that bill. And I said, great. Look at this. But some of those sponsors, they don't live in Hartford. They don't live in New Haven. They don't live in Bridgeport. They live in the boondocks, in the suburb. And they don't have to deal with a situation that I had to deal years ago here in Hartford. It's not fair. It's not fair. I'm saying it's not fair. When you get up and you say, I want to help those kids, but you don't know what is the suffering and the problems and what you have to go through to save your kids. All those killings out there. I remember when I heard a siren, the police, my heart was jumping, was beeping, because I thought of my kids. And today, if we allowed all those kids to get out, to apply, and maybe qualify and get out, without a base, with no training, no housing, because some of these kids, they'll get out. There's no family around now. And I hate to hear when people said, We have to do this for the poor people, for the poor kids, for the poor community. That's not true. Come on. We all here know that's not true. Put some money behind that bill. Get some training for those kids. Get some housing for those kids. Mental health services. And then we can start talking about serving the poor community like people says here in this building. Because it's not true. I hate it, and I can't take it anymore. And people said, the poor community. Oh, the minority community. Stop that. That's not true. I will say that I don't believe that kids kill because people, I don't believe that kids kill or rape because they are poor. Come on. They might steal, yes, but they don't kill and they rape because they are poor. So I have to hear this, that only in my community and in the African American community, only the kids that are poor, they rape and they killed. What about other communities? What about others' communities? Or this is just about the minority people, just Latinos and African American? I really believe that if you killed, this is intentional. It's a violent crime. And in my opinion, they should pay. If it is a petty crime, okay, early release. But if you kill, you should pay. And you should do your time. And again, if people here, they want to help them, they want to help those kids that today maybe they are 25, let's start putting your money where your mouth is. Let's help them. But let's put some resources on a bill. Let's bring them out. Let's help them to be good, good people in their community, to be successful, to have a job, to have a family. But let's do something for them. Not only say, release them, send them back to their community, send them back to the corner again, send them back to sell drugs, send them back to be part of the gang, send them back to kill people out there. And everything is going to be okay because it only happened in the poor community. That's what people says here, in the poor community. So I will say this. I would like, yes, to help. I really believe in rehabilitation. I do believe that. My kids are not around. They are with God now. But I always say that I was able to go out there and fight for them. I fought with the gang members. And things happened. They didn't die out there. But I will say that it killed me to think that my community, that the Latino community and the minority community have to go to the same thing that we did, that it was like a wild, wild west here in Hartford, I know Bridgeport and New Haven. Let's do things right. Let's work on that bill. Let's put some money behind that. And let's help the one that qualified to get out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Gonzalez. Representative Belton from the city of Middletown, the 100th, the Vice Chairman of the Public Health Committee. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this legislation, not just as a legislator, but as a social worker. As someone who has sat across from young people at their worst moments, and I can still see their capacity for change. So this bill asks a difficult question. What do we believe about human beings? Are we our worst act, or do we recognize the possibility of growth, accountability, and transformation? I want to be clear, as people before me have said, this bill does not erase accountability. And it does not undo harm. It does not guarantee release. It allows individuals convicted of crimes who have served 60% of their sentence to be considered for parole. That is considered, not released, considered. And I think that distinction really matters because we are really talking about brain development and we're talking about science. We know unequivocally that the human brain is not fully developed until around 25, 26. And as a social worker and a trauma therapist, this is something that I know very well. The regions responsible for impulse control, risk assessment, emotional regulation, those are still under construction. And I know many of us can remember back when we were that age having some issues with impulse control and emotional regulation. So this is not speculation. This is established neuroscience. So when a young person, someone 18, 19, 20, even 24, commits a terrible act, we must hold them accountable, but we must also understand that they are not yet who they're going to become. And this is not an excuse, this is reality. And if we ignore that reality, we are not being tough on crime, we are being willfully blind to the truth. And as a social worker, I've seen individuals who've committed serious offenses as young adults grow into people who take full responsibility, who feel deep remorse, who spend years, decades working to better themselves. And I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience. So I heard my colleague talk about gang violence that occurred in Hartford. And I really want to validate what she was speaking of because that was my experience. I can remember my family hearing gunshots on a regular basis and knowing to drop to the floor because that's what we needed to do to be safe. And I grew up right off Park Street at a time where gang violence was something that we just lived with every single day. And I still believe in transformation, and I still believe in science. I lost many people. I lost many people to death, and I lost many people to prison. And a lot of people don't know this, but I was born and raised in Hartford, moved to Middletown 20 years ago because of gun violence that killed a very close family member. And I want to say that that experience was hard. This conversation that we're having right now about this bill, I had to sit down and have this conversation with my family. And they weren't happy about this bill. They were sad because we are victims and it did impact us. However, this bill just gives an opportunity to go in front of the parole board. This is not saying that that person is getting released. There is so much that has to happen for them to be released. And also, I was able to have a conversation with them about brain science, about redemption, as Rhett McGee talked about, and about how people deserved the opportunity to change. And we, in this legislature, I think it's our job to give them that opportunity, to give people another chance, because if we don't, what does that say about us? We talk about our values, and one of them is seeing the humanity in people. And I think that this bill sees the humanity in people. It says that we do not believe that that act that you committed is who you are for the rest of your life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Belton. And we're going to move on to Representative Sims from the 140th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in conflict of this bill. For many reasons. We talk about young people having redemption, and I do believe in redemption. I believe in second chances. But when an individual decides to take a life, that individual doesn't have a second chance. Their family doesn't have a second chance. And here we are, putting forth a bill to say, hey, you kill someone, it's okay, because science says your brain wasn't fully developed. I don't know about many of you, but I was born and raised in the Runacore housing projects. My twin brother and I were the babies of 8 children. And I will tell you, there was gun violence on a daily basis. I was 14 years old, and I don't think I ever mentioned this to any of my colleagues here. 14 years old, playing basketball in the Runacore housing projects. There was some drug dealers coming down from New York City, and they decided to open up shop and sell crack cocaine and you name it in our neighborhood. Some of the older guys confronted those individuals and told them that this wasn't going to be allowed. Those individuals left, came back probably about 20 more individuals. They all came with assault rifles. They came in the middle of this, in the center of the project, and they opened fire. They was killing mothers. They was killing fathers. They was killing pregnant women and even children. No remorse, no compassion, no consideration. I was out there. Me and one of my best friends, we laid on the ground. Bullets was ringing everywhere. My friend actually looked up to try to see what happened or what was going on. Lo and behold, an AK-47 bullet went right through his throat. 14 years old. I turned him over, and the only thing I can do was take my thumb and stick it in his throat to stop the blood from coming. But yet, we sit here and we say these kids deserve second chances. My twin brother, on our 18th birthday, I just turned 55 on May 1st. My 18th birthday, I was in college. I get a phone call, my twin brother was shot in the stomach. Because a young guy tried to rob him for his jewelry. But yet, here we are. We need to get forgiveness. Fast forward, 2007. My oldest brother, Larry, they were in my mother's apartment. Christmas Eve, 2007. 2 young men smoking PCP cigarettes in front of my mother's window. My brother goes outside and asks them, please take that up the street, go somewhere else and smoke that mess. It's coming through the windows, and we have elderly relatives here that's from Georgia and Florida. You would think those 2 young men, they 25, 26 at the time, they would say, you know what, it's Christmas Eve, you're right, we'll apologize. No, what they do, pull out a firearm, a .357. We don't like what you said, old man, we don't care. One thing led to another. They get in a confrontation. My brother's fighting this guy. He gets the gun away from him. Another gentleman who was with him walks up, picks the gun up, and pointed at my brother. One of my other brothers looked down and saw the gentleman and said, hey, don't pull that trigger. And mind you, these are 2 young men that lived right downstairs from my mother. We knew them their whole life. Where was their compassion? Where was their sympathy? My brother tells him, do not pull that trigger. He looks up at my brother like this, looks back down, and fired away. Right through my brother's elbow, hit a main artery, kill him immediately. But here we are, saying have compassion. They were under 25. What about the families? What about the victims? This happened to my brother 20 years ago. My family is still reeling over this. His wife, Jadira, his 2 sons, Gabriel and Elijah. One was 5 at the time, the other was 10. They grew up, my brother loved his sons. They loved their father. And that love was real. I don't know about you, but I grew up without a father. And I would tell you, I envy that love. And I feel my nephews was deserving of having that in their lives. So to sit here and say, this is good legislation, this is something that we should pass in the House to make sure that young men and women have a second chance. And I believe in second chances, folks. Has this been robbing a house? Has this been taking a car, joyriding, and crashing it of some sort? Even worse, this could have been rape. I believe in that kind of redemption. But when you decide to take a life, there's no coming back from that. So I will tell you, I am conflicted because I believe that we should have second chances for individuals. And I gave Representative Roberts my word that I was going to support the bill. They changed it from 26 to 25. And I'm still conflicted. But I will tell you, the pain, the suffering, the agony that my family and other families like mine go through on a daily basis, that was 20 years ago. And my colleague, Representative Butler, his brother was murdered 40 years ago. And that pain is just as real as it was yesterday. So I'll tell you, let's think hard and long about this, folks. I'm not sure if any of you have ever had that kind of close tragedy in your family. But be compassionate about those victims. Let's put up policies to help those folks. To me, this is a feel-good bill. But I think we have to really look deep within this policy, look deep into this work. Folks, we have to do better. Because this is a slap on the wrist and a slap in the face to victims and their families. And I still don't know how I will vote on this bill right now. But I will say, look at my family. My family is torn forever. My brother is gone forever. My nephews had to be raised by their mother without a father in their life. As much as we all try to help and assist and put ourselves in replacement of my brother, it doesn't compare. Mind you, my brother was an engineer for IBM for almost 35 years. He was the senior head engineer at his department. And all of that was taken away because he asked two young men that was 25 and 26 to not smoke PCP cigarettes in front of my mother's window. And I don't think no one deserves a second chance when they decide to make a decision so cruel, so harsh, and unsympathetic to the individual. So I ask my colleagues, vote with your heart. I'm not telling you to vote yes or no. I'm telling you, vote with your heart. Vote with your conscience. Because there's families out there that really need this type of support, this type of compassion. They don't get redemption. They don't get forgiveness. They're hurting every day. So I'm telling you, please, vote with your heart. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Sims. And we're going to go to the front row. Representative Butler from the 72nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm thankful for the chance to speak on this bill before us, to share a perspective that many of you don't know anything about, in the hopes that you might understand what people go through on the other side of this equation. I shared with some of my colleagues here that for the last 5 days, and anticipating this bill being called, that I was contemplating my response, what I would add to the debate. And I could tell you, some of you have noticed I've been going through some issues here. Medical-wise, I've been taking some medication that actually really accentuates emotions, which can range from very high to a little lower. So I have to really temper myself in this because I didn't want to get so angry that it just came off as an angry black man. And as I took the time before the debate to speak to the good chair of the Judiciary Committee to tell him that And these kind of bills, they have come up in the past that I've probably showed a little bit more aggressiveness and anger. And I just wanted to let him know that I had no ill feelings towards him personally on him doing his job of bringing these bills forward. I felt the need to say that because I didn't know what would come out of me today. And I wanted him to know that. I respect what he does. And it's really not personal. I'm so honored to come and serve. To serve in this General Assembly. It's in my DNA. This is me. This is me. And I love serving the people of my district, of my city, and the state of Connecticut. And there's only one thing, that I have trepidation to, and that's the murderers, the vicious crimes that is prevalent within our cities in this state. And we talk about it in generic terms, murder. Murder is all too simplistic. Do you know, you have to recount the details of these murders. What happens? You heard my good colleague, Representative Sims, explain that, but there's so many other hideous murders. Calm down. You know, whether it's a criminal out on the streets of Waterbury bumping into a police officer to see if he has his protective armor on, then shooting him where it isn't and killing him. Whether it's a guy who gets in a car accident with a pregnant woman and there's a conflict and he kills a pregnant woman. There's a case of a 19-year-old in Waterbury who invites a young teenager into his yard. He has a sledgehammer and bludgeons his head to murder her. There's people who act like they're helping a woman who is in distress with a flat tire, who actually gives assistance, winds up raping her, dumping her body in a nearby lake. Imagine what these people feel in their last moments of life. When we talk about murder, we're talking about those kinds of things. So let's not just use this generic term like it's just murders. It's so hideous. It is so very hideous. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on one person who came to the General Assembly, Dr. Pettit. So some of you were here when he came here, and what he went through. And to his credit, when he came here, I wanted to talk to him and tell him that, can we please go out to lunch? I need somebody to talk to. I was hoping in talking to him, it would somehow be kind of therapeutic to talk to somebody, you know? And really, he came and left so fast that, I really didn't have the chance to connect. But I am so much in awe of him because he could have came here and just been consumed by the criminal justice element that has turned his life outside beyond comprehension to anyone in this chamber. But he didn't. Instead, he focused on serving the people in his district, dug into public health issues and served his time and did what he could. And when he felt the time was right, he left. Before he could let this whole thing consume him. I'm kind of envious of that. And I wish him well. I don't want to be perceived as the opposition to the murder debate in this House. I do want to be defined in that manner. I would rather want to be defined for how we as the legislators, General Assembly, can bring to bear some resources for victims, families of these murders and these hideous sexual violent offenses. After all, we're talking about a murderer, one person, maybe a couple, but what's the fallout from that? Here's families. It's not one person. Families could be 2, 3, a dozen. Certainly for all of you who want to help murderers navigate through the system, get special consideration. Certainly, if you want to do that for these people that are in your districts, I would beg to say that certainly you should have interest in helping the victims' families. There's a lot more of them. There's a lot more of them in your districts. There's a lot more of them in your districts. Shouldn't we do something to help them? Have we seen a bill that says what we're going to do to help victims' families on the board? When's the last time you've seen one of those? Can somebody step up to the plate and help those families? Because I could tell you, as I described this, having lost a brother being murdered, you got to do all you can. And I described some things about this whole process to some of my colleagues here and what it takes to not fall into the vengeance category. So let me tell you, to have that control, is something else. But at the time this guy was released, I had a wife. We bought a home. We had a beautiful daughter that we were raising. And if I fell victim to this vengeance, I would have fell into being on the murder side of the category. My wife would have lost the house that we worked so hard to get for our family. My daughter that went on to excel beyond belief, going to 2 Ivy League schools, doing really, really good. How would her life has changed if I was incarcerated during those years and couldn't support her and drive her all over the East Coast in this whole process of helping her and her achievements? If I wasn't there for that, where would she have been today? Where would she have been? It would have just been another mother and daughter in poverty that we don't do enough to support because we don't support the victim's family. Anyway, moving right along, I just want to let you know where my heart is. I feel strongly that people who are released from incarceration should be given resources to find housing, training, jobs. I do. I support that. Because what's the alternative? We don't even think about that. So it's better for us to support them. I believe in that. I support that. So I just want to let you know, this is just not me being hell-bent on opposing this. I believe in that. But I believe in that under the conditions that all of these people who commit crimes, no matter it's sexual offenses, murder, they should be held to the sentencing and all the rules at the time of their sentencing. That was the rule of law then. Let's not go and try to adjust this for them later. No, adjusting them, no. This adjustment stuff, no. Let them live by the rules that was in place when they committed the crime. And when they come out, I'd be more than happy to support them in any way we can. I will also say, well, and I recognize that, and I'm not going to misrepresent the bill. This is not a bill to just open the door and let people out. I realize that, okay? But they should do their time. And when it comes to the argument, it's priceless. Priceless. The mind doesn't develop until 25 years old. I'm sorry. How many of you didn't get it until you were 25 years old? Really? Really? Come on. Come on. I'm not buying any of that. I'm not buying any of it. And I think it is so dangerous to even invoke that into this debate. Because if we just say that we're going to be blindly given a blanket for poor decisions, fatal decisions for people up until the age 25, we are doomed. We are doomed. I know that my parents, Wilk Sonny Butler and Melvia Butler, they ain't happening in their household. We were raised with God-given sense. And let me tell you, in the fear of God, in a father figure, that I dare you. Now, some of these young people may not have that presence in there, but let me tell you, I think for the most part, somebody has somebody in their lives that play that role. And I could tell you, it was portrayed, it was demanded of us. Don't let us have to come to school to talk to anybody about your behavior. Do not let me get a call. Because whatever's going to happen there, when you get home, it's going to be a whole different story. But, I mean, I guess back then we were held to a different standard. And I don't know what it's going to take for parenting to actually adjust to life as it is today, but we're going to have to look at that in a different manner. 25 years old is no excuse. Let's just drop that nonsense, okay? That's nonsense. We can't give people 25 years and give them excuses to do whatever they want. I'm sorry. It's not an option. And then I could tell you that, I mean, to me, it comes down to, if I could ask one question, does it matter to anyone here, how would you feel about the person that murdered your loved one, your mother, father, sister, brother, child? Does it make a difference if they were 19 or 20 or 22, 24, or 25? Does it matter to you what age of the person that murdered your loved one? Are you going to stop and think, oh, this person killed my loved one. Oh, they were only 19. Yeah, they should get special consideration. How many people do you think for a second believe that? So if I were to ask that question and have everybody here answer it, does it matter if that person was 19 or 20 or 24 or 25? Do you think they should get special consideration and collect the combined answers here? I think I could just drop the mic. Because I'm sure it doesn't matter what age of the person that murdered your loved one. And I can tell you, it really wouldn't matter. And I'm going to move on quickly because I don't want to go too far. But you know what? I want to tell you about the process. So your loved one gets murdered, and victim's advocate comes to your house, interviews your family. And they ask you, okay, these are the guidelines for sentencing for this murder. 20 to 30 years, we think we could get 30 years, and what you advocate for, of course, you said 30 years. Anyway, then it goes to court. They present, our letters at the court, sentencing happening. They go off to jail, okay? And people, it was talked about the victims' statements are taken under consideration in the parole board. Okay, fine. Really? Now, I'm going to give you the flip side of that. I'm going to tell you the reality. The reality is, now that that's all taken place, and we just seen the case last year, where all this played out, and what did the parole board do? For all the victims, and I heard there was closure that came with that, the conviction and submitting your letter of recommendations and consideration. Heard there was closure? Well, we just saw the parole board release how many people? Last year, just last year. Okay? And, oh, by the way, they had the nerve to release 2 murderers from City of Waterbury who had 26 years left in their sentence. I don't know about you, but how much good time do you have to serve to get 26 years commuted from your sentence? Really? 26 years. So that means all those victim statements that were submitted meant what? Meant what? So whatever we do here on this, what I'm trying to tell you can be circumvented by these folks. Regardless of this, regardless of trying to help, they in one fell swoop release all of these violent offenders, sexual offenders, murderers. So don't be fooled by this process, okay? The reality is something like that could happen. And I'm going to move on a little bit because I want to get to the end of this because I want the proponent to actually have his time. It's only fair for him to share his story. And, we all have our stories, so I want to make sure that he has time for his story. But all what I'm sharing with you, if we had to take a scale of 50,000, and what I'm sharing with you, the needle might not even make it to 1. That's how much of this impacts a family over all these years. It's these people will possibly get a chance to be released from prison and redeem themselves. Myself and all the victims' families, You know what our sentence is? Our sentence is life without parole. For the rest of my life, for the rest of my family's life, for the rest of all the victims' families' lives, they will live with this for the rest of their lives. I have to take this to the grave because I cannot purge myself from it. Please consider that for all the victim families. They carry it for the entirety of their life. Now I say, instead of doing something like what's here, we should take a proactive approach. Okay, let's cheer up a little bit. Okay, let's do some things like passing more bills, like Tammy Exum with the 5001 bill for mental health. We talk about addressing that 25-year age thing. That kind of legislation where we put that in elementary schools, middle schools, expand it, okay, address mental health issues. Let's start there. Let's start there and address it there so they don't grow into the bad behavior stage. Let's start nipping it in the bud. That's one way. Another way is let's expand the juvenile justice review boards to create diversionary programs so that they're not off to jail. How about we put more money into that? Okay? The youth violence prevention dollars that we actually bring into our neighborhoods, okay? We actually do after-school mentoring. We have children that go to community organizations, okay, and have robust activities. We keep these kids off the streets and away from the criminal element on the streets. It's valuable. We can't even measure the success that has had because the success is only measured in what we don't read about in the newspapers and see on TV. But I'm telling you, it's playing an important role in actually curbing violence. Let's put more money into that. Let's do more of that. Got another thing. How about we address poverty? Poverty. And it's a big term, but we could kind of nip it around in different pieces and talk about how to deal with it. And I could tell you there's one thing that I actually got from Representative Minnie Gonzalez. Now, this kind of bill, let me tell you what this bill should be. Let me tell you what this bill should be. Minnie Gonzalez, great idea. We were talking yesterday. Why don't we set up a transition program in our prisons that we actually do training for inmates that are coming out soon, do training, that we have caseworkers work with them to facilitate housing and jobs. So we don't wait until they open up the door. We don't wait until they open up the door, throw them back in the neighborhood, and we're going to do these things. We've already have it in place. When they're released, they already have somebody working with them for housing. They already have matched with a business to give them a job. And that makes a lot of sense. Minnie, that's great. You should submit that next year. That's what this bill should be. Let's form the transition before they leave. So upon being released, they have housing, they have training, they have a job, they have a business that will accept them. The success rate is probably, exponential. Great thing. That's what we should be doing. And we got about 2 or 3 more things to talk about here, but I'm telling you, and please, from my perspective, and for a lot of people, I'm sure it's not just me, You know, there's this statue of Lady Justice outside courtrooms. And what is she wearing? A blindfold. Now, you can interpret that a couple of different ways. I could tell you one such way. She doesn't want to see what's going on in that courtroom. Because she stands for justice. But what happens in this courtroom isn't always justice. You know what it is? It is the rule of law. It is the rule of law that we live by and controls us and keeps us in the boundaries to be civilized people. That's what the rule of law is. But please don't go there and think that you're going to get justice. You ask all the people who have gone through the system, especially when they're the victims of these hideous crimes, how many of them think justice has been served? Boy, I'd like to see that poll, because I could tell you, justice doesn't enter the equation. It really doesn't. So, and that's the fallacy. We expect everybody to live by the rule of law and behave themselves, but when we call on it because we believe in it and see that it doesn't work, you lose faith in the system. And losing faith in justice is a terrible thing. I mean, that leads to some of these people that when you see on TV, there's a shooting on one side of the city in the early part of the day, and there's retribution on the other side that has been a retaliation for the one on the other side. It's because these people don't believe there's going to be any justice, so they're going to take it into their own hands. That's full out from this as well. And I only have like 2 more things that I want to share. Please, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, maybe a term or 2, but I would be heartfelt if I see in the next session somebody offer some bills that provides relief and resources to the victims' families. They're in our cities, they're in our districts, they're in our state. They deserve to be helped. Can somebody step up? Can somebody step up and help him? Can somebody please step up and help them? And so I'm against this. I believe that the people who commit the crimes, they should follow the rules at the time that they committed crimes. Full stop. That's it. Period. That's it. And upon release, I'd be more than happy to help them. Or if we pass the bill for the transition, I'm all in for that too, and help them. But this, no, this is not it. And please, I will end in telling you, it just pains me to come here every time one of these bills come. In the last 5 days, the first day, I only got 2 hours of sleep. The second day, I got 0 hours of sleep. The third day, I got 2 hours of sleep. The fourth day, I got 0 sleep. And last night, I got 2 hours. So I can't wait until we get out here tonight. So I'm hoping now that this discussion is over, I can have a night of sleep. Please, the last thing I want to leave you with is the victims' families have a life sentence without parole that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. They take it to the grave. I will have to carry this burden to the grave. Please remember that. Thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker. There's so much more I could share. I don't know, somebody said I should write a book. Maybe I should, because people need to know what to expect when they have to go through the process of being on that side of the equation, or what it takes to go through the system, navigate the system, and then live with it for the rest of your life afterwards. I just can't. I can't articulate any better in the time we have, but thank you. And thank you for the chamber for taking the time to listen. I hope that I have actually given you some insight into the inner workings of being a part of the victim's family's equation, what it takes to navigate the judicial system, how the parole board could make arbitrary decisions to the betrayal of the very people that they say, we took your statement and we're going to hold them accountable to that and then release them. Please, don't forget these things. Don't forget them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Butler. Will you remark? Representative Roberts from the 137th. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's obvious that this is my priority bill, but just a brief question for the proponent of the bill.
You may proceed.
This bill that you have in front of you currently, in current form, in 2023, do you know of a familiar bill?
Representative Stastrom.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. It's my understanding that I think starting back in around 2015, this legislature first eliminated life without parole crimes for individuals under the age of 17. In 2023, we raised the age to 21 with a sentencing cutoff date and a parole eligibility date that was embedded in that bill. Through you.
Representative Roberts.
So, thank you for that. I just want to make sure, by your knowledge, is that bill Senate Bill 952? Do you recall?
Representative Stastrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't recall the exact bill number. Through you.
Representative Roberts.
Okay, so thank you for that. Just a couple comments. So roughly in 2023, actually in this chamber, in June 2nd at 10:25 p.m., this actual same language of this bill was voted on with the arbitrary cutoff date of October the 1st, 2005. So the tally that I have is 148 people voting. 100 people, yes. 48 people, no. With all the same language that you have current form of this bill that you have today, SB 503. So I'm torn today to see some responses from both of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because over 100 people in this room voted yes to the same exact language. And respectfully, I'm not too sure if my colleagues remember, but this actual bill started at the age of under 25 years old. Just as the bill is stating today. So in 2023, 100 of my colleagues in this room voted in support of the same exact bill, same exact charges, Republican colleagues, Democratic colleagues. So I'm troubled today. We started a process in October of last year where we packed the room with about 300 people at Yale University. And in that room, there were people sharing their stories of being the victim and also being someone that had committed a crime. I heard those stories and I brought back what we know as, in 2023, SB 952. But if it now, its current form, Senate Bill 503. all I did was think about it and say, mentally, trusting in the science, the brain fully doesn't develop till you're 25 years old. So everybody reads 26, but it's under the age of 26. Just like the current form that you guys have in law, that 100 people in this room voted for, it is 21 years under, which is 20 years old. With that being said, after the Yale event, I was torn a little bit because I know my personal story, and I'll get to that in a few seconds, but I did do a background check of just this room all the time. There's 40 black and brown people in the entire Connecticut General Assembly, and black people make up 17% of the state. Brown people make up probably 22% of the state. But we overpopulate the prison systems. Something doesn't make sense. We passed the handcuff bill here last year, so you guys don't remember, but we banned handcuffs on kids 14 years and under. First in the nation to do it. But we talk about giving back to the youth and helping the youth. We traumatize the youth by putting handcuffs on their bodies. Many of us make the decisions in the room that are detrimental to our communities. I truly feel a way when I think about the stories that I've heard today about creating legislation to help stop the violence and all the above, stop the poverty and all the above. We sit back and we create what we know as the End Homelessness Caucus. If we want to stop the poverty, everybody would join the caucus. Everybody would want to create legislation to provide services for those people. Because we know that concentrated poverty is the reason why a lot of us are in situations that we're in today. My colleagues on this side of the aisle sometimes get familiar with, when we do the budget, youth violence prevention money. They say that a lot about youth violence prevention money. So when we talk about putting money into our communities that are affected by this bill, I kind of look at my colleagues that get that money. We got to hold ourselves accountable. So I'll tell you a personal story. By the age of 16 years old, I went to a house party. That house party ended with someone being stabbed and murdered. My friend committed the murder. He ended up beating that case because of self-defense. Every day from 16 to 21 years old, it was trauma back and forth in my city. This is all Googleable facts. By 18, my best friend that committed that murder, he was murdered. Shot in his head 16 times while I was in the car with him. "21 years old. My other best friend currently is doing 35 years to life because he had his back against the wall and murdered the person that murdered our best friend. So when I tell you guys I sit on both ends of this story, I've always had to have compassion for the victim because I am the victim. But I'm also the person that looks at it on the other side as well because I'm supporting a victim still currently. So we talk about the services that we could provide, the diversionary programs. Respectfully, this bill is for majority of the people that are in this room. We want to go to war all the time about education funding, but we never go to war about funding for them nonprofits and for the kids that need it. I just told you guys that in this room right now, I'm a black man. I am 15 to 20 times more likely to go to jail than any one of my colleagues that are not of my skin color. So if you look at the bill, it says 3% of the people will be eligible. We're asking just for an opportunity. This is not a get out of jail free card. I sat through 189 testimonies during our current committee process of this bill, coming out of committee. Over 500 testimonies written. And everybody got up there and shared their story. And a lot of people kept saying, oh, the age, the age, the age. And I understand that. Some people can't get to the age. But I've also seen some people say, well, my son would never. Well, you don't know that until something does occur. I hear my colleagues say redemption. That's a strong word because it means a lot. But I sometimes am torn because many of my colleagues will never go through what I've went through in my life, ever. It is very, very hard. But then I look at this bill and this tally sheet from SB 952, and a lot of my colleagues supported the bill with an arbitrary cutoff date of October the 1st, 2005. Which means that if I was committed a crime a year later, I would be treated differently from someone the year before. Oh yeah, and we're doing it not at the age of offense as well. So I could be convicted at 21 years, at 19 years old, or 20 years old, I'm sorry, and be tried and convicted and get my trial date at 23. I'm not eligible at all because of this cutoff date. That is modern day mass incarceration. We are allowing a date to decide the fate of people's life. It makes no sense. And I battle with where that date came from. I still can't fathom it. I don't know what happened in 2005. But I'll just say this to say this. All my life, I've realized going into this building that I love to dress well. I love to smile. I love to move around the room. But I also understand as a black man, I gotta work 15 to 20 times harder than my counterparts. Just because of what my skin color looks like, and just because of who I am. And just because if you turn on the news every day, there is always a situation. And just because inside this bill and inside the prison systems in the state of Connecticut, they are overpopulated with black and brown people. But we make up the least amount as population. My mom had me on her insurance till I was 26. You know you were in the car, you get that surcharge till you're 25. These are all facts. Does anybody know why? Because you look at it and you trust the science of the brain. So this is why this bill is important to me. Not just for one person, but for people to come home. But to see the recidivism rate to be 11%. But to see if we create this bill and pass it as today is law, 3% of the people will be eligible. We're not talking about millions of people coming home today, guys. And we're not even talking about them coming home. We're talking about them actually being given an opportunity. Because in 2023, 100 of you in this room, you gave them an opportunity. And in 2026, it clearly seems like there's something totally different. But you know what's different? We're still overpopulating the prison systems as black and brown people. You see what's different? We're still arguing about education funding, but we're not putting funding into diversionary programs or to nonprofits that help black and brown kids stay out of the mass incarceration that we have here today. And lastly, you know what's different? Is This is not about being hard on crime. It's about being smart on justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Roberts. Representative Rojas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move we pass this bill temporarily.
Bill passed temporarily.